go back to I guess the start, and I guess what I remember of the interview process was really cool with you, Jared, and I have it in my head to this day, and it's one of the reasons why you're the number 2 podcast that we're doing, because I know, and we'll talk about it a bit later on in that, but I know you're into podcasting, you're into media and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll take it back to the interview process. And do you remember, coming in for that interview that day and just sort of sitting down and thinking, gee, what am I getting myself into?
Certainly. Well, when you say it like that, and but yes, I certainly do. In fact, in this very room and everything, of course, I always think in that sort of nostalgic kind of attitude toward things. The house I grew up in, the first car I had, that sort of stuff. But it wasn't so much what am I getting myself into. It was really an extension of what I'd already been doing. The property industry is broadly similar, because at the end of the day, and the best way I've ever heard property management be described, it's people management. At the end of the day, you're mediating between people, with tenants, with homeowners and things like that. And when you look at the basics of building management, it's essentially the same thing. Yes, we're managing the structures of the buildings and the infrastructure and things like that, but at the end of the day, the most important relationships are the ones that we have with our body corporates and our residents and everybody else.
Oh, totally. And that's one of the key things that always comes through when we're talking to people about building management is building management, building, but it's the people management, like you say, and managing people's expectations. If we could be called expectation managers, it might actually be quite a good name for the role. But yeah, I remember thinking back to your interview and when you came on board. I liked the fact that you were you had some experience in property. How did you get into property management? Being the role that you were doing before this, like what sort of led you into property management to start with?
It was actually a classic case of not what I know but who I know that started it off, and I'll always have to admit that it wasn't any particular skill set on my part that began it. The company I worked for was founded by a guy who was actually up from Christchurch after the earthquake. That was a dramatic story. Heck, they had I remember the 1-year anniversary, the 10-year anniversary of that happened last year on February 22nd. But yeah, well, certainly seems like it was certainly not that long ago. But the family was up to Auckland because the house had been damaged first, and that was a real bizarre sort of thing. First, they were told it was going to be okay, but then, of course, they had the aftershocks, and it was about 9 months later than they told it was a write-off, and they had to get another one. So they were up in Auckland for about 2.5 years, and I met the owner and his wife and children and everything like that. And several years later, while he was here, he built a bit of a portfolio in Auckland.
Oh, yeah.
And several years later, he needed another man to help, and I got on board that way. But in terms of experience I had before, not really. I always have a joke about this. I studied to be a journalist, and I ended up in the property industry. Still not quite sure how that happened, but
it's funny you say that, because when I was at high school, I was wanted to be a journalist when I was growing up, and I did, back in those days it was called sixth form journalism, and man, I loved it, and I was like, right, I'm going to be a journalist when I grow up. And I wanted to be a specific type of journalist, which was called a photojournalist back then, and you'd cruise around taking photos and writing stories about your photos and that sort of thing, and that really appealed to me. So it's interesting that you wanted to be a journalist. So how far did you actually get with the journalism thing?
Well, I did get my degree, and there was some and everyone makes jokes about the arts degrees and things like that, but some of them are very dynamic. We had access to a television studio, and we did some work there. That included election night 2017. We were working the equipment with a guy in Espina was there, and a couple of others.
Pros.
And this is Winston Peters, our new kingmaker, that sort of one. Yeah.
That election night coverage is fascinating to watch. Like even now, well, I kind of model it off how the States, but it's riveting to watch. I love it. And it's like I love watching like America's Cup and those sorts of things that people might think is quite boring to watch, but is actually the way they put those productions together is fascinating, and how they communicate, the messages coming in from all the different polling booths and all the different regions, and the predictions and things that they make. It is fascinating. So how sort of deep into that side of it did you get?
I could certainly have gotten a job in that field if I wanted to. We did a lengthy internship with Sky Television. We went to several rugby matches with the Sky guys.
Yep.
And like you've alluded to, the amount of equipment and technical expertise that's involved.